Have you ever wondered why just one small comment from someone can leave you angry, upset, or emotionally off balance for an entire day? It's not because they have power over you. It's because perhaps without realizing it, they touched a wound within you that hasn't yet healed. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." But what exactly lies in the unconscious that manipulates our emotions every day? It's not just childhood memories, it's the shadow, the disowned parts of our psyche, the hidden realm where we store what we refuse to face. In the next few minutes, I invite you into a strange and powerful journey, not to control others, but to free yourself from being controlled by others' influence on your emotions. This isn't about anger management tricks. It's about uncovering why you're truly angry and who within you is really the one reacting. You'll meet your inner child, the part of you that still trembles each time you're criticized. You'll explore how we project unhealed wounds onto others and often get angry not because someone is wrong, but because they unknowingly triggered a complex within us. You'll understand why when we fail to set clear boundaries, we end up angry at others, but we're really angry at ourselves for not saying no sooner. And you'll come face to face with an often overlooked part, your inner critic, the voice inside you that can be more brutal than anyone outside has ever been. Each shadow you face is a forgotten part of your soul, but Jung didn't want you to eliminate it. He believed that only by embracing the shadow can we begin the process of individuation, of becoming fully ourselves, free from the emotional control of others. In this video, I won't just share theories. I'll tell you real stories of Sarah, a woman paralyzed by the fear of being judged, of John, who learned to pause 3 seconds before reacting, and of Mia, who finally set healthy boundaries without feeling guilty. And if you've ever felt ruled by anger, criticism, silence, or someone's scornful gaze, then you're standing at a rare threshold, the chance to confront the deepest unconscious part of your being. We'll begin with the most essential foundation, the shadow. There's a hard truth to accept: most of your anger isn't really about the person who triggered it. They're merely a mirror, unintentionally reflecting a part of you that you've never wanted to see, the part Carl Jung called the shadow. Within that shadow lies shame, envy, fear of abandonment, the longing to be seen, and all the parts of yourself that society or childhood taught you to reject. Imagine yourself as a child mocked just for showing emotion. In that moment, you learned a lesson. Showing vulnerability is weakness, so you buried it. But it didn't vanish, it was pushed into the unconscious. And when a colleague says something today that echoes that old feeling of being belittled, the buried part rises up, but you call it anger. Jung didn't see the shadow as an enemy, but as a forgotten friend trying to be seen. In therapy, he often witnessed people dreaming of monsters, dark figures, or conflicting characters. This is the unconscious knocking, trying to deliver a message. It's time to meet the rest of yourself. Take Sarah, a 32-year-old woman, smart and capable. But every time her boss gives even mild negative feedback, she shuts down, becomes defensive, or goes silent for the rest of the day. When she began practicing a shadow journal, writing down the ugly feelings she'd never dared admit, Sarah realized she was living with a belief: if I'm not perfect, I'll be abandoned. And the gentle critique she received wasn't the problem. It was the echo of a childhood memory when her mother often said, "You've disappointed me." This is what Jung called a complex and unhealed emotional cluster lying in wait to hijack your behavior. And when you're unaware of your shadow, it runs the show from the dark. You feel angry, hurt, jealous, but don't know why. A vital step toward mastering your anger is learning to observe rather than react. This is where Jungian awareness becomes essential. Anytime you feel triggered, try pausing and asking, what part of me is this reaction coming from? I call this the shadow pause. A long enough silence to hear the voice of the unconscious. When someone says, "You're so selfish," instead of immediately defending yourself, turn inward and ask, when did I first become afraid of being labeled selfish? Maybe it was the time you said no to a loved one and were made to feel guilty for days. Now imagine if each of us had a journal dedicated to the shadow, the moments we felt small, envious, wounded, ashamed. And instead of rejecting those parts, we learned to embrace them. As Jung once wrote, wholeness does not come from perfection, but from embracing both the light and the dark within us. This isn't an easy journey, but it's a true one. And you're not alone. Thousands of people are beginning their shadow journals, learning to befriend the parts of themselves they once denied. If you've ever felt like I'm the only one who overreacts, know that you are in the right place. Share in the comments. What was the last thing that made you angry, and what did it reveal about you? You'll be surprised how many others have felt the same. Real connection begins with truth, not perfection. Now that you understand anger isn't a sign of weakness, but a signal to look deeper. Stay with me. In the next section, we'll explore a simple yet powerful technique, the 3-second pause, how a man who once lost everything to anger eventually reclaimed his power and peace. And maybe once you learn it, no one's words, gestures, or tone will ever control you again, because you've begun reclaiming control over yourself. The moment between stimulus and response, it sounds simple, but that's where your entire inner freedom is decided. Viktor Frankl once wrote, "Between stimulus and response, there is a space, and that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom." Carl Jung would certainly agree, but he would go even further, saying that your response isn't just a choice, it's a reflection of how deeply you've confronted your unconscious. Imagine you're driving on the highway. A car in front of you slams the brakes, almost causing an accident. Anger flares up, but you don't react immediately. Instead of honking, cursing, or cutting them off to teach them a lesson, you take a slow breath for 3 seconds. And in those 3 seconds, something happens. A part of you, the instinctive part that wants to lash out, is illuminated by another part, the conscious, mature self that sees the event as it is. That's a Jungian moment when you observe yourself instead of becoming fused with the emotion. In therapy, Jung called this amplification, expanding meaning from a single behavior to explore its deeper symbolic roots. In the example above, the driver's action is the stimulus, but your rage might be the symbol of a fear of losing control or a feeling of being disrespected, both rooted in unresolved past experiences. This is the story of John, a successful businessman who once lost his family because of his anger. He shared, "I used to believe other people made me angry, but when I learned to pause for 3 seconds, I began to realize I was reacting to an old part of me, a child who was once beaten for making mistakes." Those 3 seconds aren't just about self-control. They are a ritual of transformation. A way to slow the soul long enough to hear the inner voice say, "Where am I hurt? What memory is repeating itself?" And then you can respond not from instinct, but from awareness. I call this the inner mirror practice, a simple pause to reflect within. It doesn't require deep meditation or strict discipline. Just 3 things. Notice the emotion as it arises. Pause, don't speak, don't act immediately. Get curious with yourself. Ask questions like a friend, not like a judge. We can practice this every day, especially in small interactions, when your partner responds curtly, when your child spills water, when a waiter is slow. These small moments are where growth happens, not on mountaintops, but in kitchens, offices, cars, and living rooms. If you're watching this video and have ever tried the 3-second pause, share your experience in the comments. Leave a sentence like, "Today I paused when, and I realized," because you never know, someone might need to see they're not alone on this path. You might ask, what if I pause, but the emotion is still there? That's a beautiful question. The pause is just the first step. The next part is learning how to understand and transform that emotion, not deny it, and not let it consume you either. And that's exactly what we'll explore in the next section. How to set healthy boundaries without guilt. How to say no to a request, end a relationship, or speak up with compassion for others and for yourself. Because sometimes what makes you angry isn't that others are too much, but that you didn't dare say no in the first place. And that too is part of the shadow, the fear of rejection, of being disliked, of being judged, silently guiding your actions. Stay with me, because in just a few minutes, we'll rewrite how you set limits, not through anger, but through deep self-respect. Through the voice of someone who's walked through the dark and learned to stand firm in their own light. Setting boundaries, it sounds simple, but for many people it's the hardest thing to do. Because in order to say no to others, you must first dare to say yes to yourself. And that, as Carl Jung emphasized, requires the courage to face your fear of rejection, of being disliked, deep shadows hidden in the soul of every person. Imagine you're in a meeting and a colleague keeps interrupting you. Inside, you're boiling, feeling dismissed, sidelined. But you stay silent, force a smile, and tell yourself, "It's fine, I'll speak up next time." But next time is the same. You start to feel angry, not just at them, but at yourself. That's the story of Mia, a mother of 3 who always put others before herself. Every time a friend asked for help, even when she was exhausted, she still said yes. When her husband came home late, She said nothing but resentment built up inside. When she entered therapy, she broke down in tears over one simple question: when will it be your turn to matter? Jung once said, no one becomes whole without first having the courage to speak the truth to themselves. And sometimes that truth begins with a simple boundary. I can't do that right now. I need time for myself. I'm not comfortable with how you're speaking to me. A boundary is not a wall, it's a door with a lock. You choose who enters and who stays outside. It's not selfish. It's the maturity of a soul that honors its own worth. But why is it so hard to set boundaries, Jung would say? Because a part of your unconscious still believes that if you don't please others, you'll be left behind. That fear may have formed in childhood when you learned that being good is being loved while disagreeing is being punished or being ignored. So every time you try to set a boundary, that old fear rises again, like an archetype of the abandoned child, the part of you that once got left out for saying no. But here's the beautiful truth: you are no longer that child. Today you can become the psychological parent to yourself, the one who defends your boundary without apology. Try applying the boundary blueprint. Define your boundaries. What drains you, hurts you, or makes you feel like you're not yourself? Communicate clearly, not passively, not aggressively, just expressing what you need. Hold this line gently but firmly. You don't need to over-explain. A no to others can be a yes to your soul. If you've ever struggled with boundaries, share below. What boundary are you learning to set? You're not alone. In this community, we learn to love ourselves without guilt. We learn to speak our truth without fearing disconnection. And most of all, we learn to see boundary setting as a spiritual act, because you are choosing to honor yourself. Jung once wrote something fascinating. Those without boundaries live in suppressed anger, while those with boundaries live in gratitude. And it's true, Mia, after her healing journey, learned to say no without guilt and to say yes to herself without asking permission. I want to leave you with one question. If today you could say yes to just one thing for yourself, what would it be? Let that question lead you into the next part, where we'll explore how to respond to criticism with depth and awareness. Because it's not just broken boundaries that hurt, it's also the outer and inner voices that keep judging you. In the next section, you'll learn how to detach from criticism without losing your compassion for others and for yourself. Criticism, for many people, it's like an invisible dagger. It doesn't make you bleed, but it can leave you emotionally crushed for days. Jung once said, we are not hurt by what others say, but by what those words stir up within us. That's something most of us were never taught, how to distinguish between what someone says and the echo already living inside us. When someone says, you didn't do well enough, the words only scratch the surface, unless they awaken a deep belief already within. I'm not good enough. That unconscious belief is what Jung called a bundle of repressed emotional memories formed by past wounds we never fully processed. Let me tell you about Alex, a designer at a media company. One day his manager gave him feedback that his work lacked impact. Alex didn't just feel sad, he crumbled. That night, he sat alone, flooded with self-doubt. But in therapy, he uncovered something surprising. As a child, every time he showed his drawings to his father, the response was always, it's okay. Just those two words repeated through his childhood became ingrained as a belief: no matter how hard I try, it's never enough. When we overreact to criticism, it's often not about what was said, but about how it triggered an inner wound, a psychological scar that hasn't healed. Jung didn't advise us to avoid criticism. He invited us into a deeper practice to break criticism down into three parts. Fact: what part of this criticism is actually true? Emotion: what emotion is the other person speaking from? Projection: what part of themselves are they projecting onto me? This is what I call the criticism filter, a tool to help you stop absorbing someone else's emotions as if they are the truth about you. Because the reality is, most criticism comes from fear, pressure, or the unhealed shadow of the other person, not from some universal truth about your worth. And sometimes the harshest critic isn't external. It's you, the inner critic. That judging voice in your head can be more brutal than anyone else. It whispers, you failed. You're not good enough. You don't deserve it. But remember, as Jung emphasized, we don't overcome the darkness by fighting it, but by bringing the light of consciousness to it. That light is self-compassion. Instead of reacting to your inner critic with fear or avoidance, try listening to it like a child crying out. Ask, what are you afraid of? What do you need right now? And then gently but firmly respond, thank you for trying to protect me. But I'm okay. I'm moving forward. If you've ever been hurt by someone's words, share your story in the comments with a sentence like, "I used to believe, but now I'm learning to see it differently." Give yourself permission to heal and let this community be a place where you can speak without being judged. Criticism stops being the enemy when you understand its structure, and especially when you know what part of you is being stirred up by it. And when you learn how to transform that response, you don't just protect yourself, you help others feel safer when speaking with you. At this point, you might already feel the shift. You are no longer easily wounded by other people's words because you've realized they're just surface ripples. The real peace lies in the depth beneath. And as a natural next step, let's move into another vital phase. How do we truly release negative emotions once we've understood them? How do we let go of anger, blame, or pain, not by suppressing it, but by releasing it with grace, gratitude, and wholeness? In the next section, you'll discover the release ritual and gratitude reset, two soulful tools that help you let go without numbing and release, without forgetting the lesson. Because healing isn't erasing the past, it's being able to look at it through the eyes of a soul that has grown. There's a moment every one of us has experienced when the noise fades, no more hurtful words, no more demands, no more stimulation, and you're left alone in silence with yourself. But strangely, instead of feeling peace, you feel heavy, because the anger is still there. The bitterness remains. A part of you is still gripping something, a memory, a word in action, as if letting go would mean losing a piece of your identity. Carl Jung called this unmetabolized emotional shadow, the energy that remains stuck in the psyche because it hasn't been transformed into understanding. And he believed that what we don't transform will continue to repeat. You might try to forget to work harder, to have fun, to shop, to meditate. But if you haven't truly released it, that shadow will still sneak into your actions, your choices, your life. Letting go isn't about instantly forgiving someone or pretending the pain never happened. It's the conscious act of returning emotions that no longer serve you with respect and awareness. A Jungian way to do this is through a release ritual, a conscious farewell to old emotions. Think of it as a final conversation with the feeling that's been living inside you. Write down everything you're still angry about, grieving over, or resenting. Look at those words as fragments of memory, not as you, but as parts that once lived inside you. Then take a deep breath and read aloud your goodbye, not in hatred, but in gratitude. Thank you for protecting me. Thank you for helping me survive. Now I choose to move on. You might burn the letter, drop it into water, or simply place your hand over your heart and say, "I am ready to let go." Letting go isn't an act of the mind. It's an act of a soul that has ripened. A soul that realizes holding on to pain doesn't hurt others. It only distances you from life. That was Lena's journey, a woman who lived 10 years in anger toward her abusive father. One night after writing a letter she never sent, she cried not from pain, but from relief. She said, "I don't need him to apologize anymore. I just need me to keep living." She didn't forgive in the moral sense. She freed herself from emotional chains. And that, as Jung said, is a form of spiritual rebirth. One essential step in this process is the gratitude reset, recalibrating your emotional frequency through intentional thankfulness. Because after release, your mind needs something to orient toward, not the past, but the light ahead. Each day, write down 3 things you're truly grateful for. Not cliches, but specifics. A beam of sunlight through your window, a friend who truly gets you, a moment when you had the courage to speak your truth. Every line you write is a declaration, "I choose life." And little by little, you stop living from the past, you begin to live from intention. If you've ever tried a release ritual, share in the comments, "I let go of this, and I received this." You'll be surprised how many others in this community are walking this same path. You may have heard people say, letting go is forgiveness, but to Jung, letting go is a return to your center. It's when your actions are no longer ruled by old memories, but are led by the light of your own awareness. And that is where this journey is leading you, to an inner space where you no longer react, no longer spiral, no longer blame, but simply remain fully present with yourself. In the final section, you'll reconnect on all the pieces we've explored, recognizing the shadow, pausing the reaction, setting boundaries, facing criticism, and now letting go. And finally, you'll understand what Jung always emphasized. True freedom doesn't come from controlling others, it comes from mastering your inner world. Let's now walk into the final chapter where all questions meet their stillness. You've walked with me through the layers of the psyche, from sudden flashes of anger to the depths of inner complexes, From the moment you learn to pause for 3 seconds before reacting to the realization that setting boundaries is a declaration of your soul's worth. You've learned to separate yourself from criticism, no longer letting others' words define you. And at last, you've learned the art of letting go, not to forget, but to live more fully. Carl Jung once wrote, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain. But pain isn't the end, it's the doorway." And if you've dared to step through it as you just have in this video, then perhaps you're already beginning a great journey, the journey back to yourself. Look back at who you were yesterday. Someone who reacted on instinct, easily wounded, living in memory and judgment. Now look at who you are today. The observer, the conscious one, the boundary setter, the one who lets go. This is the process of individuation. The sacred path Jung believed was the ultimate purpose of life. Not to become perfect, but to become whole. Not to avoid the darkness, but to learn how to walk through it with a light in your hand. If this video has touched something in you, please share a sentence in the comments like, "I've realized this about myself," or "I'm learning to let go of," not just so I can hear you, but so that others walking through their own shadows can find light in your story too. Subscribe to this channel if you want to keep walking this Jungian path where we don't just study theories, but learn how to live with soul. I'll see you in the next video where we'll go deeper into the symbols of anima and animus, the masculine principle within the feminine psyche, and the feminine principle within the masculine. A sacred dialogue between the two creative forces that live within you. Because only when your inner world is in harmony can the outer world find peace.